Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to another lecture in CS 101. In this video, we are going to look at what are inline functions and also what is function overloading. So the first thing is what is an inline function? In fact, inline is a command. It's not a type in which we differentiate between different type of functions. Rather, it is a command to the compiler that enables the compiler either to consider the function as a normal function or to embed the function in the code where it is being called. Now, to understand what is inline functions and why we use inline functions, let us consider how the execution of a function in C++ works. So for instance, if I write maybe void and my function, and it does whatever, and then I have int main and I have some code, and then I call my function, let's put a T over here, and there is some other code, and here the main ends. So what happens is, as we have seen so many times, that when the program starts, the first control goes to main. So the code start executing line by line starting from the main. So this line will be executed, then this will be executed, and so on. If there is a variable statement like int x is equal to 0, it means that a variable x is created and it is stored together with the program. And so this is executing line by line. When I have a call to function, now the serial execution of the program is halted. The program shifts to the function and the code in the function is executed again line by line. To do this, it means that the memory space of the main function here, where everything was, the code and the variables of the main were being executed, this has to be saved, and then the program will move to my function. This space, the code and the variables will have to be loaded. The next instruction goes to the computer CPU. The variables are loaded either in the register or the stacks or something. Anyway, that's an internal working of the computer. We don't need to go into that, but it's suffice to know that the memory section in where the variables and the instructions were being executed, this is for the main and this is for my function. So whenever I encounter a function, it means that this entire memory segment has to be saved. This segment has to be loaded. It will be executed, and when I'm finished with it, I'll have to save this, or since this is a function, then this will be destroyed, and then I will have to get back the main function that I was working on, reload it, and then continue the execution. Now that is fine, it does it automatically, we don't have to bother with that. However, it does slow down the program, because now when my main is being executed, this entire section has to be saved. All the execution, the code and the variables, which line was first, which was executed, what has been done, what is yet to be done, everything is saved. This is loaded, this is executed, and then when it finishes, then this has to be reloaded back into the memory, and the computer will start executing again. So this is fine for a normal program. If this is a large function and you need to do that, that's fine. However, in some cases, when the function is small, for instance, consider this function. This function only, it takes a variable s and then returns the cube of that variable. So simply s into s into s. So it multiplies the same variable 3 times and returns the value, and it's a type double. So what we can do is we can add, this is how the function normally looks like. We can add the keyword inline. What this is telling the compiler is, if possible, because this is a small code, rather than halt the program, save the main, move to the function, load the variables and the code, just try to take this code and embed it over here as if no function call was made and you are just executing serially. Just try to embed this code over here if you can. And so this inline here is basically a request to the compiler to see if it is possible to just embed this code or the result of this code right inside the main, so that we don't have to go through the process of saving whatever was in the main, loading the function, executing the function, then saving whatever needs to be saved and then reloading the main. So इस सब से बचने के लिए अगर पॉसिबल है, सो इनलाइन बज़ाहिर एक कमांड है, यहाँ पे हम डबल लिखते हैं तो इसका मतलब है कि जो भी रिटर्न टाइप है वो डबल का होगा. S is of type double, it's a variable of type double, that's a command. It, you know, in any case, in every case, S will be of type double, क्योंकि हमने कहा है कंपाइलर को, तो कंपाइलर हमेशा S वेरिएबल डबल टाइप का ही बनाएगा. जब आप इनलाइन करते हैं तो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आपकी कमांड जो आपने दी थी वो फुलफिल भी हो, आपकी विश थी आपकी, बेसिकली ज़रूरी नहीं है कि वो फुलफिल भी हो. अगर तो वो इनलाइन कर सका तो वो इनलाइन कर देगा. इनलाइन का मतलब है कोड जो है उसको एम्बेड कर देगा यहाँ पे, बजाय इसके कि इसको एक फंक्शन कॉल बुलाए. और अगर नहीं कर सका तो इसको इग्नोर करके जो नॉर्मल फंक्शन कॉल होता है उसी तरह ट्रीट करेगा इसको. सो सेम गोज हियर. इंट मैक्स, ए और बी के दरमियान आपने देखना है कि कौन सा बड़ा है. ए ग्रेटर देन बी, question mark a b. If a is greater than b it will return a, else it will return b. ये सिंटैक्स हम पहले देख चुके हैं प्री मिड टर्म. सो ये आपके पास बेसिकली फंक्शन था int max, int a, int b, and that's what it was supposed to do. Here again inline is a request to the compiler that since this is a small function, try to see if you can embed it directly in the code. If it's possible it will do it. If it is not possible, then it will simply ignore the inline and then treat it as a regular function, in which case, you know, it will be halted, the variables and the code will be saved, the function will be loaded, the variables will be loaded, the processing will be done, the return type will be saved, main will be reloaded again, the return type will be assigned, and so on. So this is basically what an inline function is. From the point of view of execution, nothing changes. It's just used, it's normally used when the function is small. अगर बड़ा फंक्शन है आप उसमें इनलाइन रिक्वेस्ट कर भी लें तो वो नहीं करेगा. अगर छोटा फंक्शन है तो आप इनलाइन लिख के देख सकते हैं. अगर कंपाइलर उसको अलाउ करता है तो वो कर देगा. अगर फॉर सम रीज़न उसने जो अपना स्ट्रक्चर बनाया हुआ है अंदर उससे नहीं हो सकता है तो वो नहीं करेगा और इसको नॉर्मल फंक्शन के तौर पे ही ट्रीट करेगा. So this was about the inline functions. The main topic today is, however, function overloading. We did see a hint of that in the few lectures that we did before mid. In the last lecture I think we had before mid, we saw a hint of that, but today we are going to look at it in detail. So what is function overloading? So as you can see in this picture, these two kids look very similar to each other. So they look alike but they may exhibit different characters. Similar is the case of a function. A function is overloaded if it has the same name and however its values may be changed, the signature may be changed. We'll see what is the signature. The name is the same, however depending on how you call it, it will exhibit different characters. So दो फंक्शन हैं सेम नाम के लेकिन थोड़े डिफरेंट तरीके से परफॉर्म कर सकते हैं डिपेंडिंग कि आपने उनको कॉल किस तरह किया है, किस वाले फंक्शन को कॉल किया है. बज़ाहिर देखने में सेम लग रहे हैं क्योंकि उनका नाम सेम है. So C++ enables several functions of the same name to be defined. So several, it means it can be two, it can be more than two. So several functions. The keyword here that of the same name. If I am doing the same task with two different names, they are not function overloading. It is just bad programming. The same thing is being done and with two different names. कंपाइलर को तो नहीं पता अंदर क्या हो रहा है, उसने तो नाम डिफरेंट देखे हैं, दो अलग अलग फंक्शंस हैं. So that is not overloading. Overloading is when the function has the same name, as long as they have different signatures. In the next couple of slides, we will look at what is a signature of a function. And this process is called the process where the function may have the same name but perform different variations of the same task, ideally, is called function overloading. The C++ compiler selects the proper function to call by examining the number, types and order of the arguments in the call. So एक ही नाम के दो तीन functions हैं, उनमें से कौन सा call होगा, that depends on the number, types and order of the arguments. Arguments are the parameters of the function. So इन तीन चीज़ों पर depend करता है, the number, the types and the order. So let's look at this example. Overloaded functions are distinguished by their signatures. Signature is a combination of a function's name and its parameter types in order. So here we can see that we have two functions, both are named square. So the name of this function is square, the name of this function is also square. What is different, however, is that the first one takes an integer x and the second one takes a double x. So they do the same thing. Ideally that is how what they should do. एक नाम के हैं तो एक ही तरह का काम करना चाहिए. कंपाइलर ये नहीं देखता, दिस इज जस्ट गुड प्रोग्रामिंग प्रैक्टिस, कि अगर आपने एक नाम के दो फंक्शन बनाए हैं तो वो एक या बड़े सिमिलर से काम करने चाहिए उनको. अगर आप इसको कुछ और क्रम करवाएंगे, आप स्क्वायर की जगह से क्यूब कैलकुलेट करवाएंगे तो कंपाइलर को तो नहीं पता. दैट इज योर लॉजिक. However, as a good programming practice, that is what it should be. That if they have the same name, they should perform similar functionality. Coming back to what we were discussing, the name is square, the name is square. So the name is exactly the same. The return types are different, but we don't care about the return type. The return type is of no significance when we are talking about function overloading. The only thing of significance is the type of the variables and the order in which they occur. So the name of the variable is also not important. So x की बजाय y होता तब भी उससे कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ना था. जो चीज़ important है वो ये है कि स्क्वायर फंक्शन में पहला आर्ग्यूमेंट इंटीजर टाइप का था, इस स्क्वायर फंक्शन में पहला आर्ग्यूमेंट डबल टाइप का था. तो उनके टाइप और उनका ऑर्डर जो है ये इम्पोर्टेंट है. रिटर्न टाइप इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, वेरिएबल का नाम इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है. So in this case we have two. So if you are calling it square 7 is an integer. Because it's an integer, it means that this function will be called, and you will have the square of an integer 7. So 7 into 7, it will give us 49. If I call this 7.5, this is a decimal value. So it cannot go into an integer. It will look and see if there is another function by the name of square that takes a double or a float, then it will use that function. अगर ये फंक्शन एग्जिस्ट ना करता, सिर्फ एक ही होता, तो या तो वो ट्रंकेट कर देता 0.5 को और या फिर एरर देता. दो में से एक काम करता डिपेंडिंग ऑन द कंपाइलर. So in this case, if you are using square of 7, it is calling this function, and it's if you're calling 7.5, then you are using this function. So the C++ compilers encode each function identifier with the number and type of its parameters. This is sometimes called name mangling or name decoration, and it is used to enable a safe linking of the operators or the functions. This is a concept we will study. For those of you who study the object-oriented programming, you will know what is linkage. But for now, just to figure out which of the two will be used, that is what this means. So what's the signature of a function? Let's look at it in more detail. Function's argument list, the number and type of argument is known as the function's signature. So functions with the same signature, it means there are two functions with the same name and types of arguments in the same order. So नाम भी सेम होना चाहिए, टाइप भी सेम होना चाहिए, ऑर्डर भी सेम होना चाहिए, तब फंक्शन का सेम सिग्नेचर आएगा. वेरिएबल का नाम, as we said in the previous slide, it does not matter. So for instance, the following two functions have the same signature. So this is my function, my function. The first one is int, the second one is float. Here again we have int and float, even though this is a, x and b, y. So the name of the variable does not matter. Similarly, अगर मैं where can I have my pen? Yeah. अगर मैं इसको काट के यहाँ पे int कर दूँ, even then they have the same signature. So they have the same signature. So the return type doesn't matter, the name of the variable does not matter. What matters is the function's name is the same, the number, type and order of the variables is also the same. So my function takes two variables of type int and float. My function takes two variables of type int and float. This means that they have the same signature. So if you try to define this, it will give you an error. It will say that this function already exists, because according to the compiler the signature is the same, so you cannot have two functions by the same name. What you can do, however, is void my function and maybe float x int y. Now what you need to see here is that the name is the same, so otherwise it will simply be a different function. For it to talk about overloading, the name has to be the same. What's different between this and these two is this also has one integer and one float. However, the order is different. Here the int comes first and the float comes second. In this case, the floats come first and the int comes second. So this is function overload. This is an overloaded function with different signature. Another variation I could have done is void my function int a. That's it. So this also has int a. This has a second parameter, this does not. So this and this, or this and this, differ in the number of parameters. This and this differ in the order of the parameters. So either the number, the type, or the order of the parameter is has to be different. So another variation could be void and my function int a int b. So this differs from these two because the order is different. This differs because the number is different, and this differ because the type are different. So these three can be overloaded functions of any of these. These two can't occur together because according to the compiler they are the same thing. So one of these with these three can occur. Similarly, just if I write this again and change it to int as I showed here, that is also not acceptable. So return type या वेरिएबल के नाम, इनसे फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता. फ़र्क किससे पड़ता है? या तो ऑर्डर चेंज हो, या नंबर ऑफ पैरामीटर्स चेंज हो, या उनकी डेटा टाइप चेंज हो. इधर भी दो हैं, इधर भी दो हैं, लेकिन इसमें सेकंड फ्लोट है, इसमें सेकंड इंट है. So these three are acceptable function overloadings. So let's look at another example here, and here we have a function called prnsqr. It's going to print the square if it is possible. So here we have void print square int I. If you call that function, then what will happen, int I, आप उसको I में ये पैरामीटर आएगा, कॉपी होगा, int I का स्क्वायर यहाँ पे प्रिंट हो जाएगा. प्रिंट स्क्वायर करेक्टर सी, अगर आप करेक्टर के थ्रू कॉल करते हैं तो यहाँ पे जिस सिंपली राइट के करेक्टर का हम स्क्वायर नहीं ले सकते. If you call it using a float, it will use this version of prnsqr. So print square, it will use this function using a float. फ्लोट का स्क्वायर प्रिंट कर देगा, और डबल वैल्यू देंगे उसको तो वो ये वाला वर्जन यूज़ करेगा. सो द इम्पोर्टेंट या द एडवांटेज इज़ दैट एज प्रोग्रामर आपको याद रखने की ज़रूरत नहीं है कि जी इंटीजर के लिए कौन सा फंक्शन था, करेक्टर के लिए कौन सा था, फ्लोट के लिए कौन सा था. ऑल यू नीड टू डू इज़ जस्ट नो दैट the name of the function is print square, prnsqr. That's all you need to remember. आप int पास करेंगे तो int वाला कॉल हो जाएगा, आप करेक्टर पास करेंगे तो करेक्टर वाला पास हो जाएगा. So that's the advantage from a programmer's point of view. And here is the summary of what we have seen so far. So signature of subsequent functions match the previous function. कंपाइलर को पता किस तरह चलेगा कि ये ठीक हुए हैं कि नहीं हुए हैं. कंपाइलर क्या करता है कि द सिग्नेचर ऑफ पहला जो फंक्शन आ गया वो तो उसने उसका सिग्नेचर स्टोर कर दिया. जब दूसरा फंक्शन आएगा सेम नाम का, द सिग्नेचर ऑफ द सब्सिक्वेंट फंक्शंस मैच द प्रीवियस फंक्शंस, देन द सेकंड इज ट्रीटेड एज अ रीडिक्लेरेशन ऑफ द फर्स्ट एंड इट विल गिव यू एन एरर. कंपाइल नहीं करने देगा आपको. द सेकंड केस इज द सिग्नेचर्स ऑफ द टू फंक्शंस मैच एग्जैक्टली बट द रिटर्न टाइप डिफर. Then the second declaration is again treated as a redeclaration and it will give you an error. Again compiler type error होगा, सिर्फ return type different हो रहे थे वो नहीं करेगा allow. The signatures of the two functions differ either by the type or number of parameters or even the order. Then the second declaration is treated as an overloaded function of the first and that is okay. So here you can see square square float f float x, वेरिएबल नाम चेंज है कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ा. स्क्वेयर स्क्वेयर फ्लोट फ्लोट ले रहे, रिटर्न टाइप डिफरेंट हैं. दिस इज नॉट enough to differentiate between two signatures. So in this case it will say this is a redeclaration of this. आपने एक ही चीज़ को दोबारा से कर रहे हैं, ये अलाउड नहीं है, it will give you an error. However अगर आप इसको चेंज कर देते हैं, यहाँ पे end कर देते हैं, even though के return type same है, this will be allowed. So this is not allowed, this is allowed. And in summary, function overloading means that having the functions with the same name and different parameters, ideally they should perform similar tasks, but that's up to you. ये आपकी जिम्मेदारी है कि वो टास्क सिमिलर परफॉर्म करें, कंपाइलर नहीं देखेगा इस चीज़ को. int square int x return x into x, float square float x return x into x, दोनों जो हैं वो x into x रिटर्न कर रहे हैं. एक इंटीजर ले रहा है, एक फ्लोट लेता है. इंटीजर के साथ पास करेंगे ये वाला कॉल हो जाएगा, फ्लोट के साथ पास करेंगे ये वाला कॉल हो जाएगा. द प्रोग्राम चूजेज द फंक्शन टू बी कॉल्ड बाई इट्स सिग्नेचर एंड दे कैन हैव द सेम रिटर्न टाइप. सो दिस इज द समरी ऑफ फंक्शन ओवरलोडिंग. एंड हेयर वी हैव द एग्जांपल. सो यूजिंग std, अगर हमने नेम स्पेस नहीं लिखना तो हमें अलग बताना पड़ता है कि जी सी आउट के साथ भी std यूज़ करो, एल के साथ भी std यूज़ करो. इन दोनों की जगह हम जो अमूमन इस्तेमाल करते हैं वो ये है यूजिंग नेम स्पेस std, मतलब कि तमाम चीज़ों के साथ std यूज़ कर लो. सो int square int x रिटर्न दिस, int square डबल y रिटर्न y इंटू वाई. और यहाँ पे आप देखेंगे कि जी द स्क्वायर ऑफ 7, ये वाला कॉल होगा इंटीजर 7 वाला 49, स्क्वायर सॉरी डबल 7.5 वाला 56.25. So in this case the first one will be called, in this case the second one will be called. So as I said, the advantage of that is that you only need to know कि स्क्वायर जब मैंने लेना है तो उसका फंक्शन जो है वो स्क्वायर है. एंड दिस इज इन द मैथ सी मैथ लाइब्रेरी या स्टैंडर्ड लाइब्रेरी IST में भी है. अब डायरेक्ट इसका सॉरी ये तो आपने यहाँ पे किए हुए हैं, लेकिन इसका आपकी मैथ लाइब्रेरी में भी एग्जिस्ट करता है अगर आपने अपने ना बनाए हुए होते। उसमें आपको कैसे पता चलेगा कि कौन सा यूज़ करना है, तो यू डोंट हैव टू। सिमिलरली एस क्यू आर टी जो है वो आप यूज़ कर सकते हैं, ये मैथ लाइब्रेरी में है एस क्यू आर टी। लेकिन आपको यह याद नहीं रखना पड़ेगा कि इंटीजर के लिए कौन सा था, फ्लोट के लिए कौन सा था, डबल के लिए कौन सा था। जस्ट राइट एक्स क्यू आर टी ऑफ एक्स। एक्स अगर इंटीजर था तो इंटीजर वाला कॉल हो जाएगा, एक्स फ्लोट था तो फ्लोट वाला कॉल हो जाएगा, आपको अपना स्क्वायर रूट मिल जाएगा। यू डोंट हैव टू remember the different names. So you can use the built-in, for instance this, or you can define your own, for instance the way we have done over here. So that was about the inline functions and function overloading. If you have any questions, you can either ask in on the Teams, or you can ask during the interactive session. So thank you